getting the nomination by popular vote. And the Democratic Party did what we're seeing today with Bernie Sanders. They went on a major media campaign to smear the guy. They made him into somebody very unlikable, which is what we're seeing with Bernie Sanders, that, oh, he's a Russian. He cozies up with the Russians. He tried to have a Russian sister city. He went on his honeymoon to Russia. He's a Russian asset. He's a socialist. They go on and say all these things that are very negative. And they did this in 1972 to George McGovern. There was actually a movement of Democrats that came out saying Democrats for Nixon. They wanted Nixon over George McGovern, and they actually campaigned on behalf of Nixon. So in 1972, the progressive movement won the popular vote. The people were very excited about this, but the Democratic establishment smeared George McGovern so badly that he was defeated soundly in the 1972 election against Richard Nixon. He won 2 states, and only 2 states. And that was largely because of the media campaign against him. So, roughly every 50 years, we have this uprising of the people where we say we are fed up. We don't want to deal with this crony capitalism anymore. We're being robbed by the wealthy. The government is overrun by the wealthy. And we want to take our government back. In fact, let me just read to you some of the platform of the Progressive Party of 1912 so that you can understand just how similar it is to today. And it's very similar to the progressive platform of the late 60s, early 70s. Here it was Roosevelt's Square Deal. And the Square Deal, which was the progressive movement, the platform was, says here, the Square Deal was President Theodore Roosevelt's domestic program, which reflected his 3 major goals: conservation of national resources. Excuse me, my phone. Gosh, I don't even want to read the notification. It's a news notification. Are they going to tell me some bad news, more bad news about the primary? Says the Square Deal was President Theodore Roosevelt's domestic program, which reflected his 3 major goals: conservation of natural resources. So that would be like the Green New Deal. Control of corporations. So this is what Bernie Sanders talks about. Even Elizabeth Warren talked a lot about this, of the corporations need to be regulated. And consumer protection. These 3 demands are often referred to as the 3 C's of Roosevelt's Square Deal. So he also talked heavily about, here in the progressive movement here, the platform also asserted that to dissolve the unholy alliance between corporate business and corporate politics is the first task of statesmanship of the day. So look at that. Get rid of the money in politics. Dissolve the unholy alliance between corporate business and corporate politics. That is the progressive movement at its core, and that has been the progressive movement at its core, along with a better foreign policy. Now, Teddy Roosevelt wasn't, I definitely wouldn't say the guy was anti-war. I would say that he was war on behalf of humanitarian efforts, which is not always bad. I do personally also agree that we should be going in for humanitarian reasons if it's truly humanitarian. The problem is right now we're being sold these lies of, it's for humanitarian reasons and really it's for big oil or something. But if it's truly humanitarian, I think many of us can agree with that is a time when you do go to battle for the greater good of the people, like defeating Nazis, and saying, okay, they're eradicating a whole group of people. It's genocide or things like that for sure. But, so, in the 60s and 70s, we also saw progressive movement rise up. We also saw the establishment effectively take it down. And a lot of that is the inability to make a coalition. So let's talk about a coalition. Now, what we're seeing in today's modern times is that the Democratic Party, which is basically Republican light, the Democratic Party they have decided that their new strategy to defeat Donald Trump is to coalesce, but not with the progressive wing of the party. At least that's not what they've been touting so far. They could make that change. They could decide to coalesce with the progressive wing. We'll see who Joe Biden picks as his vice president. But if Joe Biden, as the nominee, selects, let's say, Amy Klobuchar, or he even goes after a Republican vice president pick, which he's mentioned maybe doing, then you're looking at a coalition. They're building a coalition with Republicans. They're saying, we're going to go get the never Trump class. This isn't necessarily a bad strategy. What they're saying is, okay, forget the populist left wing. We're going to go after this other wing, and these people don't like Trump, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Well, guess what? Two can play this game. The way to defeat the establishment and to create a third party is we have to create a coalition as progressives. Progressives cannot break away on their own and do what Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party did, split the Democratic ticket until people get sick of losing and they finally just fold back into the flock. That is not the way. The way forward is the progressives on the left have to find the progressives on the right and coalesce with them. That means the populist movement that we have seen rising on the right are the very people that the populists on the left need to join together with. And this, I know, seems like an unnatural marriage. I know a lot of people are going to say, what, to this idea. But I promise you, the way forward, there's just no way you can win. Look, there's no way that the Progressive Party can win breaking off from the Democratic Party and living on an island on its own. The progressive movement has to coalesce with the populist progressive movement of the right. And if right-wing Republican populist America will recognize that they are the Teddy Roosevelt populists of 1912, then there's an actual shot at creating a progressive movement that defeats the establishment. As the Democratic establishment starts to form together with the Mitt Romney, John McCain, George Bush establishment of the Republican Party, then yes, actually there is a lane for, believe it or not, the Donald Trump populists and the Bernie Sanders populists. There are these people in America who say, I was either going to vote for Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. They gave me Hillary Clinton, so I voted for Donald Trump. We have to get into the minds of that person and create the party around that person. We're not going to agree on everything, but guess what? The Democratic Party right now doesn't agree on everything, and neither does the Republican Party. You're never going to agree 100% on a platform, but at least if you can agree on the basic principles of that platform, you've got a shot. And the thing about the Trump progressives, the thing about the Trump populist movement was that Trump ran on a platform of drain the swamp, that we're going to, people wanted somebody new and fresh who was an outsider, who wasn't in politics. They wanted to hear end the wars. Trump ran on ending wars, on draining the corporate crony swamp, and on taking care of America, taking care of the American people. And Bernie Sanders has the exact same message. He has the exact same message. He says, drain the swamp. The crony corporate capitalists are robbing the American people. He says, end the wars. We've got to end these ridiculous wars. I'm not going to support them. Now, a lot of people, they might not like the foreign policy of Trump and Bernie Sanders. They might say, well, they're not totally anti-war, and that's true, they're not, but they're way more anti-war than the Democrat-Republican, we could call them the Democratic-Republican Party establishment. That was the party back in the day. The government of the United States used to have, really up for until the mid-1800s, there was only one party, and it was actually called the Democratic-Republican Party. They might as well join forces and just be the Democratic-Republican Party and call a spade a spade. So Trump, the Trump populist movement and the Bernie Sanders populist movement, Bernie Sanders saying we got to take care of the American workers. Bernie Sanders is not for open borders. He is saying, no, there's no way we can have open borders if we're going to raise the minimum wage and have Medicare for all. And the Trump populist movement, the messages are very, very similar. And I believe that if the two populist groups can coalesce together, that is the path forward for a third party. And that is the only path forward. Look, you might not like it, but it's the only thing it's the only way to make it. You have to accept it. If you want a third party, you have to swallow it and say, we're going to coalesce with the right wing. And if you're right wing and you're watching this, you're going to have to suck it up and say, we're going to coalesce with the Bernie Sanders populist movement. The populists have to get together and become a new progressive party, a Teddy Roosevelt progressive party, in a way, and say we're marching forward for the people. And this is it. So a ticket in this platform would look kind of like a Tulsi Gabbard Ivanka Trump ticket. in 2024. Imagine that for a minute. A Tulsi Gabbard, Ivanka Trump. Now, I'm not a big fan of Ivanka because I don't like her husband, Jared. I think he's a giant. He's way too pro-Israel for my tastes. And his, peace plan is only creating a lack of peace in the Middle East. So I'm not necessarily saying Ivanka Trump. If she were to divorce the guy, sure, let's do it. But somebody like that, you've got to have like a coalition between like a Bernie Sanders and a Steve Bannon. Bernie is not going to be around in 2024. And I know that these might be shocking tickets to think about, but I want you to open your mind for a minute and really